हरिणीं सुवर्णरजतस्रजां चन्द्रां हिरण्मयीं लक्ष्मीं जातवेदो आवह ताम आवह जातवेदो लक्ष्मीमनपगामिनी यस्यां हिरण्यं विन्देयं गामश्वं पुरुषानहम् अश्वपूर्वां रथमध्यां हस्तिनादं प्रबोधिनीं श्रियं देवीमुपम्ह्रये श्रीर्मां देवीर्जुषताम् कां सोऽस्मितां हिरण्यप्राकाराम् आर्द्रां
Were you ever told when this spaceship was going to arrive? I mean, to take you guys off the planet?
No, never. Well, actually, there was one time where T and O were being hounded by students as to when we're going to leave, because they would always say months.
Months.
Because they felt like it was important to move as quickly as possible with everything that there was to do in preparing for that. And but at one point, they were being pressured by students, when is this going to happen? When are we going to go on the UFO? And they said, 5 years, not later than 5 years.
Okay.
When did they say that? What year did they say that?
It was, I don't know when they actually said that, but it was 1980 when T felt like she got instructions from her older member that's not in a physical body to prepare to exit. And so she told us all about it. And we stayed up all night. We were camping at a location in Texas. It's actually a tourist location. It's called Cave Without a Name. And it's a campground above a cave. And I've been there several times. And it's a nice place to visit. And so we waited up to the wee hours of the night for a spacecraft to come. And we never saw a spacecraft. And T told Doe after that happened that he only told us about after she left her body, that she felt like she had egg on her face for saying that, and it didn't happen. But because of that didn't happen, there is at least one student, in fact, one of the students that was in that 2020 broadcast, left the group. And
because it didn't happen because he felt that she was giving him false information?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Like I joined location in Texas. 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 Location in Texas.
Mandirindra mandire pasadeva mandirgata varuna jatameda mandum vishajirate manushirya pahina manyatapasa satosha abhi manyatapasastaviyam tapasajita.
And we'll begin with the two witnesses that are here. If you would be so kind as to repeat after me. I do hereby affirm
I do hereby affirm
that I will tell the truth
to tell the truth
Tell the truth
and nothing but the truth,
and nothing but the
nothing but the
truth,
truth
to the members of this committee today.
to the members of this committee today.
Thank you both.
And we're going to begin with Dr. Greer.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here, and I would just like to summarize this subject by saying that I got involved in 1990 when I formed the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and put together some of the early briefings for folks in the administration of President Clinton. This occurred because in 1992, I was leading a team of people where we had a contact event on a beach in Florida. And this got reported into a Department of Defense memo or report that was done by John Peterson at the Arlington Institute. And he was friends with a man who became CI Director Woolsey. CI Director Woolsey invited us to come to Washington to meet with him and some folks to discuss this. And it was to my great surprise and dismay to learn that the CI Director had made inquiries into this subject and had not gotten any information. This was also true of President Clinton, who through Webster Hubble had also made inquiries. Because of this, we decided to put together an initiative which was called Project Starlight. And it was very much involved in the early days with briefing senior people in the military and government.
Mr. Cameron.
As I explained this morning, my name is Grant Cameron. I'm a private investigator for 38 years. I've spent most of my time looking at what the highest levels of U.S. government, military, and intelligence agencies know about the UFO phenomena. This afternoon, speaking about the Rockefeller Initiative, my testimony is based on 1,000 pages of documents that were released to me in 2001 by the Clinton White House in response to an FOIA for UFO files. It should be noted here that, like the documents you were talking about this morning, the Roswell documents that disappeared, these documents have now disappeared. Both the National Archives and the Clinton Library both maintain they do not have the documents. For example, I filed an FOIA with the Clinton Library. I received about 1,000 pages of UFO documents, which included an awful lot of material that Stephen Greer had said to the president. The 1,000 pages that I'm going to talk about right now were not part of the disclosure, and both maintain that they don't have them. They are on my website, the President's UFO website, and basically what the documents show, these FOIA documents show that billionaire businessman Lawrence Rockefeller had approached the White House to get the government to disclose the truth behind the UFO mystery. There was different Rockefellers. There's Nelson Rockefeller, who was the political guy who ran for government. There was David, who was the money guy. And Lawrence Rockefeller was the sort of humanitarian, had a philosophy degree from Princeton, and was very interested in this phenomena. Rockefeller also had other meetings outside the White House. One example was with Republican Stephen Horn, Republican from California, from the Government Reform and Oversight Committee related to government secrecy. Rockefeller's request for UFO disclosure was dealt with in the White House by the president's science advisor, Dr. Jack Gibbons. To prepare for the first meeting in March of 1993 with Rockefeller, Dr. Gibbons requested a UFO briefing from the CIA. That briefing was tasked at the CIA to Dr. Ronald Pandolfi. So if you want to know, that's probably the guy you should be phoning. Dr. Ronald Pandolfi, who's been identified by the New York Times as the top scientist in the CIA, and a man who is rumored inside the UFO community as the agency expert on UFOs, and a man that over the last 20 years has repeatedly interacted with many researchers inside the UFO community. As the CIA has a public position of no UFO involvement, Pandolfi gave the job of writing the White House briefing, which he knew would become public because Lawrence Rockefeller was involved. He gave that briefing job to a private UFO researcher, Mr. Bruce Maccabee, who had done a couple of UFO lunchtime talks at the CIA headquarters. The briefing therefore became not an official briefing on the subject, but just a personal opinion of one researcher inside the UFO community. Rockefeller exerted great pressure on the Clinton White House, threatening to write an open letter demanding UFO disclosure from President Clinton, and to make this demand public in full-page ads in all the major newspapers in the United States. Under this pressure, Dr. Gibbons agreed to try to get some sort of disclosure on the UFO subject. He asked Mr. Rockefeller to pick one case that could be declassified, and then all the rest of the cover-up material could be dealt with. Mr. Rockefeller picked the 1947 UFO crash at Roswell as the case to investigate. And that is one of the reasons why there was a reinvestigation of the Roswell crash by the U.S. Air Force in 1994. The U.S. Air Force did not decide to do it on their own. At the same time, the White House was greenlighting a reinvestigation of Roswell. The Government Accountability Office was also doing a reinvestigation of the Roswell crash. That investigation was initiated by New Mexico Congressman Stephen Schiff, who ordered the GAO investigation after his requests for information were stonewalled by Clinton's first Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin. The GOA study, however, was quite limited. Only FOIA replies on the Roswell crash were used. Nothing was found except that a bunch of key Roswell documents from the time of the crash that would have indicated what had happened were missing. Therefore, no conclusion was offered. The U.S. Air Force reinvestigation discovered a way to bypass the actual reinvestigation of the crash. Rather than following the testimony of many of the witnesses that will be appearing here this week, they simply published a final report stating that the whole 1947 crash event had been caused by the launch of a mogul balloon designed to monitor a possible Soviet nuclear test. In 1995, in Belfast, Northern Ireland, President Clinton challenged the official U.S. Air Force Roswell report, which had no discussion of the reported alien bodies. In a speech that he gave, he stated, "As far as I know, an alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico. But if the United States Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it either, and I want to know." This open challenge in Northern Ireland forced the U.S. Air Force to do a second Roswell crash report. The U.S. Air Force released this report to a room of laughing reporters as they described how 6-foot-tall wooden dummies dressed in Air Force uniforms in 1953 somehow explained what people had described as small 4-foot gray creatures in 1947, including one alien that was still alive. The report was the Air Force's lame attempt intended to answer Clinton's challenge about the alien bodies mentioned in Belfast. Without any official record of the event, Lawrence Rockefeller did sit down with Bill and Hillary Clinton, and most of those documents were provided by Stephen Greer, who provided Lawrence Rockefeller. They met at the Wyoming JY Ranch, which was controlled by the Rockefellers. Rockefeller briefed both Bill and Hillary Clinton on the best available evidence for UFOs and for the need to make that information available to the American people. The mention of Hillary's name in the 1995 briefing at the Rockefeller Ranch is important because the Rockefeller Initiative documents that I recovered show that Hillary played a key role in the Rockefeller White House Initiative on UFOs. There are two key documents. In November the 1st, 1995, there's a letter from Rockefeller's lawyer to the President's science advisor, and in that, it points out that Hillary and her staff have been helping Lawrence Rockefeller edit a letter of UFO disclosure to the President. The letter was called "Lifting Secrecy of Information About Extraterrestrial Intelligence as Part of the Current Classification Review." And what was happening was Lawrence was sending this document to various people, and he would threaten to send the letter to the President if he didn't get cooperation, and various people helped him edit the letter. Hillary was one of the people who helped edit this letter on UFO disclosure. In a second 1996 letter from Rockefeller to the President's science advisor, in the letter he clearly spells out the information that is coming from Rockefeller to the science advisor to President Clinton, and from President Clinton's science advisor to Rockefeller. All that material is going through Hillary Clinton's First Lady's office. In 2006, the initiative faded out after the briefing at the ranch, and Rockefeller moved on to fund other UFO research activities.
Thank you.
2006, 1996, pardon me.
Mr. Gunenis.
Overseas now, the charred bodies of 16 people, including 3 children, were found today in a remote region of the French Alps. They're all believed to be members of the Solar Temple cult. It's the second time in 14 months that members of the cult have perished. 53 members died in apparent murder-suicides in Switzerland and Quebec in October of last year. The CBC's Mimi Tompkins reports.
A French police helicopter spotted the charred bodies in a forest near Grenoble early this morning. 500 officers were involved in the manhunt. It began on Friday when cars were found in the forest belonging to cult members. The 16 burned bodies were discovered this morning a couple of kilometers from the parking lot. A French prosecutor says 3 children are among the dead. He says it's possible some of the victims were shot to death. Some weapons were found at the site. Their bodies were found lying in a star formation with their feet in the middle. Authorities say brush and trees stacked up around the clearing were likely used to light the bodies on fire. The same star formation was used in October 1994. The bodies of 48 members of the Doomsday Cult were found in burned-down buildings in a small town in Switzerland. 5 more bodies were found in a burned house in Quebec. Investigators say the cult was obsessed with death and considered it an illusion. Experts say cult leaders told their followers that fire would lead them to a new world on another planet. The 1994 deaths were thought to be timed astrologically.
On peut penser que le décès remonte à plusieurs jours.
Officials say this week's mass suicide could have happened on Thursday night. That's winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Mimi Tompkins, CBC News, Paris.
Earlier this year, the bodies of 39 men and women were found in this house in San Diego. They were members of the Heaven's Gate cult. All had committed suicide, videotaping their last thoughts before they died for the world to hear.
We're so excited we don't know what to do because we're about to re-enter the level above human.
Perhaps it was the loss of several other class members that prompted Doe to go public once again in 1994. His aim was not just to recruit new members. Having accepted that they may need to die to ascend to the next level, the group's public meetings actually had a more sinister purpose.
We were also hoping that it might accelerate our departure. In other words, maybe some irate Christians would think that we were saying blasphemies and someone might take a gun and blow us up or something. But we definitely wanted to return to the level above human or something.
Rockefeller exerted great pressure on the Clinton White House, threatening to write an open letter demanding UFO disclosure from President Clinton, and to make this demand public in full-page ads in all the major newspapers in the United States.
That prompted Doe to go public once again in 1994.
Location in Texas. It's actually a tourist location. It's called Cave Without a Name.
Rockefeller exerted great pressure on the Clinton White House, threatening to write an open letter demanding UFO disclosure from President Clinton, and to make this demand public in full-page ads in all the major newspapers in the United States.
That prompted Doe to go public once again in 1994.
Location in Texas. It's actually a tourist location. It's called Cave Without a Name.
Rockefeller exerted great pressure on the Clinton White House, threatening to write an open letter demanding UFO disclosure from President Clinton, and to make this demand public in full-page ads in all the major newspapers in the United States.
That prompted Doe to go public once again in 1994.
Location in Texas. It's actually a tourist location. It's called Cave Without a Name.
And the friendlies then came to me and said, would you please try to fix this? And then someone asked me to come up and brief the CIA director, and then this person, and then the president was scared to death, and they hit a scalar weapon that knocked down Marine One, that was President Clinton's helicopter. It lifts up in the White House, and the shot was fired across the bow. So I've been doing stuff at that level, PI, presidential intelligence, since 1993. That's right. So do you think that, for example, biological problems such as cancer could be induced or used to intimidate or to take someone out of the picture?
But what you have to look at is the psychological factors involved. That if they can do one high-profile hit on somebody in a specific way, what it does, it puts the fear of God into those that they want to continue to control, so that they don't say anything out of tune. They don't probe where they shouldn't probe, like Senator Schiff was doing, Congressman Schiff was doing. We've seen in the last 10 years a ramping up, though, if one does even the most cursory research. One of the ones that concerned me the most was the death of our Commerce Secretary several years ago on a mountaintop in Yugoslavia, where the hostess, the Air Force hostess on the plane survived because she was sitting on the jump seat in the back. And a certain British group went in there first. And she was alive and healthy when she left the mountain. And she got down to the airport, she was dead. And she only had minor bruises. And somebody needs to look into the influence that certain British commando units have and their cross-pollination with other groups like them in the United States. But what was even stranger was that his body made it back to Dover Air Force Base. Secretary Brown. And they discovered that there was a bullet wound in the top of the head, about the diameter of a .45, and that a preliminary x-ray indicated that there were shavings of some sort inside the brain itself. And that yet he was raced out of that into a crematorium literally within a day, so nobody could do a serious autopsy. And the people at Dover in the Air Force Base there were severely chastised for even doing what they did voluntarily. But in the profession, there is a way of doing this with frozen CO2 bullets or nitrogen bullets. And there is no residue left except what the shattered pieces of the skull cavity. And this is of grave concern to a lot of us because this seems to be an ongoing process, particularly in the last 10 years. It's become very blatant across the entire spectrum of our government, nationally and internationally. And I think we all can just follow the web tracks these days as to where the implications are for that. And the needs for continuing control are getting more severe, and the use of these mechanisms becoming ever more blatant.
So where do you think this is headed? I mean, what do you...